So, to financially prepare for divorce, you need to make sure that you're aware of obviously all of your own personal finances, anything from bank accounts to tax returns to retirement accounts. You also need to look at any joint accounts that you have with your spouse. You need to make sure you have access to the account. You need to make sure that you know the balances of those accounts. Other financial things you should do ahead of a divorce, well, even if you're not going through a divorce, everyone should have a budget. I always say that, but especially leading up to a divorce, you definitely need to have a budget because you need to be aware of where you're spending money and how you're spending money. Because too, you need to look and make sure, hey, if I do get divorced or if I need to move out, can I financially afford this? Or am I going to need a court order to give me some form of temporary support to get me through the divorce? So it's very important that you know a budget, know your expenses, and you can do that by go through your bank account, go through your credit card statements. If you're someone who tends to draw money out of the ATM and get cash, see what you're spending that cash on, and follow that for 2 or 3 months and make sure that you know your finances. So the documents you should get ahead of filing for divorce are things for your personal accounts, such as your bank accounts. Get your statements. It's always helpful to have your statements. Most banks are only going to go back 7 years in getting statements. So if you're needing something past that 7-year point, they might be difficult to get, but it's a good idea to always make sure you have all your statements, as many of them as you can have. It's also good to make sure that you have your tax returns. A lot of times I tell clients, get your past 5 years tax returns so that we can see what's happened over the past 5 years. Go ahead and start getting copies of your pay stubs. Most people are now paid electronically, and most people don't check their pay stubs, so make sure you're getting your pay stub. Other things to do is make sure that you go and get copies of joint accounts. You want to make sure that you know what those balances are so that when the divorce is filed, if there's any withdrawals or anything like that, you'll know, hey, this account was $40,000 before we filed the divorce, and now it's $10,000. So obviously there's $30,000 missing, so that you can be ahead of the game in that matter. Kid-related documents that you're going to be looking at, one thing is school records, because sometimes, let's say a divorce is pending and it's the middle of summer and we're needing school records. Sometimes that's a little bit harder to get because schools aren't always accessible in the summer or even during certain breaks. So if you have concerns or if you're wanting to show, hey, I've been the parent who's primarily taken these kids to school and done the parent-teacher conferences and turned in the homework, go to the school and get a copy of the child's records. You have that right. Also with the children, if medical records may become important, especially if you're trying to prove that, hey, I'm the one that's been the primary caretaker of this child, I'm the one who took the child to the doctor, or I'm the one who took the child to the dentist. Go get those records because those records will show that. So in choosing a lawyer, I always tell people it needs to be somebody who you're comfortable with. You need to be able to sit down, do a consultation with them, make sure you're comfortable with them, make sure you're comfortable with their level of knowledge. If you have an attorney and they're in a consult and they can't tell you certain things about the law, that should be a concern to you. So you want to make sure it's somebody that you're comfortable with. You want to make sure it's somebody that you find to be respectful. And then also, do some follow-up work with them, do some background, look and see, have they tried cases in the Court of Appeals? And if so, what have been those outcomes? And not every attorney is going to win every case because cases are very fact-driven. But the main thing I always tell people is you need to be comfortable with who your attorney is. So sometimes it's better to prepare rather than just hurry up and get the divorce over with because a lot of times I see cases where a spouse will come to me and it could be a spouse that just really doesn't have knowledge about the party's finances. So, we really have to dig in. A lot of times we have to issue subpoenas, and that's where I send a document to a bank saying, hey, give me all the bank statements you have for a certain person for a certain time period. Because what you don't want to do is if you're not knowledgeable or if you try to rush things, you may be giving up assets that you shouldn't be giving up. So in preparing for divorce, it's really important to know your finances. It's important to get documents to back up the finances, and it's important to meet with an attorney and to make sure you're comfortable with that attorney before moving forward. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out to us at Mandy Hancock Law.